Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Let's look at the agenda of this administration when it comes to education, which is to reduce by a great percentage the number of out-of-school children, and also to integrate skills into the entire education system to address the learning crisis and reduce unemployment and build a reliable and authentic database for the sector. Such a beautiful agenda. For 1 year down the line, let's look at how this agenda has performed. I have Sam Orovwuje, who is Director, Center for Public Policy, in the studio, and my co-anchor is also here, Femi Ayodele. Good morning, Femi. Good morning, Mr. Sam.
My pleasure, Blessing. Good morning.
Glad to be here.
Good morning, Femi.
Good morning, Mr. Sam.
So I'm the blessed lady amongst gentlemen this morning, right?
Always a blessed lady.
You've always been.
Okay, that's good to know.
All right, we're talking about education sector. It's been 1 year, when the president came on board, one of the things they talked about is to ensure that he gives Nigeria quality education. Let's shift the conversation to Sam. Now, it's been 1 year, expectations were high, as at May 29 when he gave that popular speech, where they talked about the removal of subsidy, but that's not what we're talking about now. But it's just to make reference to that speech. One of the things he talked about is giving quality education to Nigerians. Now, it's been 1 year. How would you assess the educational sector in the last 1 year? I would like you to talk about some of the critical factors that have shaped that sector in the last 1 year.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Femi. When you look at a 1 year scorecard of an administration, it might really be very difficult to situate in terms of how you score the administration in 1 year. But opinion is divided when you look at education, whether the Bola Tinubu administration investment in education in the last 1 year has really impacted. But nevertheless, there are a few key points to note with the administration. Number one is the Student Loan Act that was passed into law, where a significant amount of money will be made available to students across, first and foremost, the federal tertiary institutions. So on that scorecard, there's some level of innovation of providing some kind of stipend loans to students that will enhance the number of students that can pay for their education. Number two, there was another initiative by the government in line with the World Bank where some special skill acquisition, particularly for the girl child, was brokered. And I think that scheme or initiative has improve, particularly in terms of girl child enrollment and tying those enrollment to some skill acquisition. Then three is ability to be able to resolve the lingering wage and salary issue with ASU, where some part of the money that being owed to ASU, he was able to find a way to give them about 6 months backlog of their pay. But if you look at it vis-a-vis funding and budgeting for education, I think what we have seen from previous government and the current government, I think if you look at the UNESCO benchmark of 25%, I think you see a far cry in terms of the investment on education. Then when you look at education to industry, in terms of impact, there are a lot to be desired, which has not been met in the last 1 year. But if you put it on a scorecard of maybe on the ratio of 1 to 10 within 1 year, in terms of some of the visible achievement, like Blessing mentioned, the out-of-school children ratio is still very high, but the statistics in terms of what is correct, there's a statistic from UNESCO civil society organization, and some other player in the education sector that put it at about 10.5 million. And I think one of Tinubu's colloquium in the past actually equally put that report at 10.5 million. We don't really know the number of out-of-school children, the number of children that has been pulled out in the last year. So we have that statistic, but by and large, if I was marking the script in terms of trying to provide some scorecard, I think I would score the administration in the area of education maybe about 60% in the last 1 year. Those are my personal view, but maybe as we progress the conversation, we can speak to specific issues and look at the prospects and challenges of education in Nigeria in the last 1 year and beyond.
All right, looking at the prospects and challenges of the education sector in Nigeria, let's begin with out-of-school children, with UNESCO put at over 20 million, and UNICEF adds that 1 in 3 children in Nigeria are out of school, and 60% of that population of out-of-school children are from the north. Insecurity has been blamed majorly for one of the reasons why the number of out-of-school children is increasing in Nigeria. So it seems to be tied a lot with education. Over the last 1 year, even though this administration has, as part of its agenda, reducing greatly the number of out-of-school children, yet we still have this number. What's your assessment of the work so far done at reducing the number of out-of-school children?
First and foremost, let's try to do some prognosis in terms of the statistics, the data. You have between 10.5 and 20 million. So for the fact that some organization put it at 10.5, some other 12 million, some other 20 million.
But 10.5 has been the number for quite a number of years.
Yes, the point I'm trying to make is that if you don't have evidence-based data, some of the data in the marketplace of idea might be difficult to deal with. But then the challenge is that what is important is that how do we address out-of-school children? How do we track the number that has been pulled out of that statistics in the last 1 year? Or to have the aggregate figure, it might be difficult to rely on that information of 10.5, 12 million, and 20 million, as the case may be. I'm trying to underscore the point that since we don't really have an authentic statistics, as it were, it might be difficult to really put a hand on the number. But it's a major challenge, even if it's at 10.5 million out of school children we have in Nigeria. That is a very, very, very difficult scenario. But then if you look at this figure, a greater percentage come from northern Nigeria, and beyond the recent issue of insecurity, the number has always been high from that part of the country. So insecurity has just escalated the number of out-of-school children. So local government, states, and the federal government must find a way with development partners, particularly UNICEF, UNESCO, to see how we can have, first and foremost, do a baseline study, an authentic baseline study of number of children out of school, and see how we can disaggregate those data and see the number of children that we can get into school year on year for the next 3 years or 4 years of this administration. So we know the actual number. But then the issues of insecurity must be dealt with so that parents will enroll their children and wards into schools. They don't have the feeling that when they are allowed them to go to school, they will be kidnapped by some kinds of banditry that is happening in northern Nigeria and kidnapping in some other places.
All right, let's revisit the controversy that happened between the federal government and ASU. We understood that it's one of the problems inherited by the present administration from the last administration. You talked about the payment that was done by the federal government, the backlogs of payment that was done. But let's look at some of the issues, that's been causing controversy, or like it's been disputed between ASU and the federal government, which has to do with the issue of honoring the agreements that they both had some years back. And also talking about the appalling state of public universities in Nigeria, looking at the state of education. Would you say much attention has been given to these in the last 1 year?
Precisely not in a way. And I think the challenge of education is just beyond ASU mounting the government in terms of their wage bills. I think the ASU itself has a greater responsibility in this matter. If you look at the quality of the graduates turnout from the universities, leave much to be desired. To that extent, ASU has some element of this blame game syndrome that often put on the doorstep of the federal government. On the other hand, the federal government in particular must improve on the funding of education. This idea of free education, particularly at the tertiary level, is not sustainable anywhere. So education is expensive. So if you want quality education, you must re-engineer the process in terms of the amount of money that students should pay. Two, the lecturer, on the other hand, must find a way to up their skills in terms of the ability to get resources for grants in terms of research that they can attract big research. They should look at the option of seeing how they can benefit from alumni association. There are universities outside the country where alumni grants and some grants of research from individuals, even at far outweigh even the government expenditure in those universities. So I think, like we say here, we need to have a holistic approach in terms of how we deal with the issue of education. So the government, on the one hand, the university system must find a way to see how they can improve on the quality of education, how they can attract funding. Then the funding of education must go beyond the federal government. We must find private sector initiative to funding education. And if you look at the global education funding, they had a meeting sometime about 2-3 years ago where Buhari spoke, and he promised that he was going to improve the funding for education and see how they can exploit other opportunities in terms of education funding. Finally, we need to emphasize more of technical skill education in terms of how we can improve on time-to-gun relationship, on how these skill sets can impact industry or manufacturing in a way that we can get benefit for education.
Talking about benefit for education, it's a challenge for some students to pay fees given the current economic condition. And the proposal of the federal government to introduce student loans has been opposed by the Calabar zone of academic staff Union of Universities, ASU. Now, the reason they're opposing the plan is that in their reasoning, it's a plan by the federal government to enslave Nigerian students and make them remain indebted to the country. They prefer intervention, governments giving intervention to the universities as a better alternative to providing loans for students. What's your take on this?
Well, ASU, is it Southeast or South zone?
That should be South zone.
Yes, okay. They are entitled to their opinion. But I think that opinion is not very valid. If you look at the universal practice, every country, some country in particular, provide a student loan, and that has been passed into law. So you have the Student Loan Act. So it's already a legal instrument, a framework that will help indigent students in particular to find a way to finance themselves in getting higher education. So I don't think they are called for incentive for the federal universities in particular doesn't represent a greater majority. So they have the right to their opinion in terms of how they see things. But I think the government trying to provide a loan for indigent students, in my view, is a welcoming development, and the law is already in place. What I'm worried about is the implementation strategy of how this can get to the real people who need those money in the long run. But if you look at the case of the United States of America and South Africa recently, I just read a report about the problem of repayment of a student loan in South Africa. I think the government should learn from those challenges and see how they can quickly put in place processes where those monies can be paid back. So ASU, South, they are entitled to their opinion. Student Loan Act has come to stay, and is the implementation and how that can benefit a greater majority of Nigerian students that is important to a greater majority of Nigerians.
All right, so talking about the student loan, the portal came live last week. That was on Friday, and reports has indicated that over 3,700 students have applied from 126 universities. But if you follow the drama, the controversy that trailed the student loan, you will understand that some things happened in between the time it was conceived, which was last year, and now. It's been 1 year after now. What do you make of the controversy that trailed the student loan, the implementation, and then how do we ensure that this kind of scheme, serves the purpose for which it's intended? The students who actually need this loan gets it. And then are you worried about the repayment plan?
I think for me, the so-called controversy is nothing new. One of the major challenges in life is change management. So once a new scheme comes, there are people that are benefiting from the old system. So they kind of put some kind of agenda in the public arena that we want to disrupt the process. The student loan scheme, as it was then, now already an art. So the policy framework needs a process for the process to be worked out. So it has been passed into law. So those controversies have been laid to rest. So what is important, like the second part of your question, is implementation process. Like the way we do things in Nigeria, I'm sure that political expediency will not affect the process. Students that are deserving the various benchmark in terms of qualification must be seen to be respected, and everybody that is qualified based on the policy framework should benefit. And I don't see it as a process to settle political those who are within your political environment to the detriment of those who may be in opposition. But I think it's an ongoing process, just 1 week into the scheme, and I'm sure people are crossing the T's and dotting the I's so that they meet up with the minimum standard in terms of the enrollment procedure. And once you meet those standards, I think those loans will be disbursed. But the challenge, like elsewhere, there's been a greater failure in terms of repayment. And this are occasioned by maybe after graduating and you don't really have a job that can make you to be able to repay those money. So I'm sure that the various safety nets will be put in place by the Ministry of Education to see how those loans come back at the appropriate time and it benefit the actual students.
Looking at the agenda of integrating skills in the education system to address learning crisis and reduce unemployment, do you see that happening?
I think there should be more collaboration with the universities in Nigeria and industry, particularly in the design of curriculum, particularly in line with the prediction by the World Economic Forum that some of the current job roles and subject disciplines in another 10 years may not have place in terms of the kind of knowledge that is churned out from the universities in line with industry practice. So the university themselves must find a way to collaborate with the private sector to design courses, whether they are technical or whether they are generic courses, in line with the global trend and the changing dynamics in the education sector in terms of knowledge, attitude, and the skill, so that those skill gaps that exist currently, particularly from students from tertiary institution and industry, will be quickly be bridged in a way that as soon as students come out of tertiary institutions with their skill sets, particularly those who have a technical background, industry is able to absorb them. Then the issue of default in terms of even loan repayment from the student loan scheme will be a thing of the past.
Now, let's look at the skill gap that exists in the educational sector, where you have this disparity between the town and the gown. Let me make reference to what the former CBN governor said. I don't know if I can refer to him as Emir of Kano now, but the former CBN governor, Sanusi, where he said last week that he has 100 of CVs from first-class graduates who are not employable. How do you react to that? And how do we address this disparity between the town and the gown?
I think it's provokingly worrisome when you interact with a lot of graduates from the tertiary institutions. Incidentally, I've had opportunity in the last 15 years or thereabout in sitting at interview panels, whether structured interview, whether informal interviews. And if you look at some of the performance of some of the students that comes out of some of the tertiary institutions, you begin to wonder. And that's why when I talk about ASU earlier in this conversation, that they have a greater responsibility in terms of the people they produce and they put in the marketplace. So I think ab initio, the foundational issues with our curriculum, with our education is faulty. So we need to do a recalibration of the process and bring education to where it was in the past. So I'm very worried in person and align with Sanusi in that regard. It's so worrisome that even people who had studied English and literary studies and you ask them to fix a 200-word essay just to test their verbal communication skills, to put just 200 words in terms of their best food, their best friend. People are not even able to fix 50 words. If you talk about the grammar and the structure and the lessons of what they put in place, you wonder if these people have spent 3, 4, 5 years in university. So we need an overhaul, even from the early childhood education up to secondary education, up to tertiary education. It needs a critical overhaul of that sector. And stakeholders need to look at this challenge as something that is problematic. And because education is a foundation of development. So if education is faulty, the entire process of development will be faulty.
It's about the teaching, and I did mention earlier before we went on the break that this administration also has in focus teacher training.
I think for teacher training colleges, I think that's targeting the primary school education in particular. So, but the key issue here is not first and foremost, particularly at the tertiary institution, not about the teachers. It's more about the foundational problem of curriculum development in line with industry practice, where basic educations are just taught without taking cognizance of their relevance, particularly in the industry. And so that's what you call CAS, knowledge, attitude or attributes and skill set. So once you are not able to marry these three elements, particularly in the industry, particularly where people have studied in the tertiary institution, they bring their knowledge to bear, and some of them are not employable because there's a gap between industry and what the knowledge that was imparted at the university level. And that's why I mentioned earlier, there need to be an overhaul of the curriculum for the primary and secondary education. The focus on teacher education is critical so that they are taught properly and how they can impart this knowledge, particularly at the level of cognitive and psychomotive development, which is essential for early education before they transit into a tertiary education. So I think it's an overall review of the system that can bring about employability and how suitable students that come from tertiary institution can impact industry and society.
All right, let's talk about the issue of infrastructure, the issue of funding. Earlier you talked about the role ASU should play, because if you look at the issue of strike, it's all about, people think it's all about salaries, the welfare of, lecturers. But this time around, whose responsibility is it to address the issue of funding and infrastructure deficit in the educational sector? And then what can be done differently to ensure that this thing is given much attention that is needed? Talking about private universities, you have people who have this means to also ensure that they improve the standard of education in the private setting. But it seems to me that the public universities or the public institutions are being neglected.
I don't think so. I think the challenge here is that we need to have a stakeholder engagement. Education is very critical, so we need to find a way to redefine education as a critical sector of the economy. So, number one, when you talk about infrastructure, if you see the ratio of student to lecturer, it has gone overboard. The facilities are still the same old facilities. You have TED Fund having some big funding, and I don't see the impact it has made on the system in terms of infrastructure development. Then the university themselves, as institutions, must look beyond this narrow-minded engagement of strike as an option of engaging the government. They should improve on their research funding, endowment. There are a lot of endowment across the globe that the university can attract for development. Two, the current school fees, particularly for federal institutions, is grossly inadequate in order to serve student accommodation. Even if you look at the electricity bill of some of these tertiary institutions, they cannot sustain themselves. So we need adequate funding. We need to re-engineer the process in terms of private funding, even for public sector institutions. You have a lot of private universities as well. The enrollment into some of those ones too has a major challenge in terms of the quality of even students recruited to those environments, where even the minimum benchmark set by NUC, sometimes they go below those minimum threshold, and that will equally affect the quality of the students. So lecturer-student ratio, because you have a lecturer looking at over 200 students, what kind of attention can the lecturer give to those kind of students, where some are sitting on the ground in an average lecture capacity that was supposed to be meant for 50 people? So it's a holistic approach that will resolve the issue in the education sector. It's beyond this administration, but then this administration to take it as a critical element in a way that we can resolve that issue.
All right, let's look at the issue of brain drain because talking about the ratio of lecturers to students, brain drain vis-a-vis the jackpot syndrome that has seriously impacted the education sector. What can be done in that aspect to at least shore up the gap between the number of lecturers available for the number of students?
I think the quality of remuneration has become a major issue when you talk about brain drain. So once the government can pay competitive salaries, some of those who want to migrate to other area where they think their skill set is valued in terms of remuneration will be able to stay. And that's why I talked about the fact that the government need to declare a kind of state of emergency in the education sector so that we can recalibrate that process. I can recall that even as an undergraduate in the Nigerian universities, we had foreign students among us, even up to the postgraduate level. I think some of the schools are struggling in that regard. So the facilities, funding beyond the current state of funding, the government need to improve the funding based on the UNESCO minimum threshold for funding education. The university must look for additional funding mechanisms, including attraction of research grants, look into alumni support, which is critical to university development. If we're able to put all this in place, the issue of brain drain will be reduced drastically.
All right, let's look at the plan to establish a national, what they call a national data bank, whereby records, academic records from 1932 till date will be put on a particular website, whereby it's easier for you to access the data. And also let's talk about research, which is also very crucial when it comes to that sector. Now, these are ideas that have been put into the table for our education to be better. But let's look at how it's going to be implemented. Would you say that it's going to be a game changer if you have that kind of national data bank where it would just be one stop for all kinds of data or details as regards assessing, results? And then let's talk about research that should take place in the public institutions or in the university. What state are we as a nation? And what can be done differently to improve or fund research in the public institutions?
Yeah, when you talk about data, are you talking about school data? Are you talking about research
School
data?
results.
Are you talking about transcript data and all that, so that we can be able to underscore the discussion? What is important, essentially, particularly at the tertiary institution, is to be competitive in the marketplace of ideas. So once you are competitive, be able to attract research grant and research support. There are a lot of lecturers, even as bad as these institutions are, that have been able to attract very meaningful grants from international donor organizations. But if you talk about some of the research outputs, particularly what people call research in Nigeria, what I normally describe as long essays, I think if they find a way into that national academic database, I'm sure that it will just be a replication of people's work over the years. Only the pages of those long essays will have changed. But that is not to underscore that you have genuine, serious research data that we can deploy. So it's one thing to create a database, is another one to resource those data for national development. So if we're able to strike a balance between creating a repository of academic transcript, research data, and those who have graduated from university, and how you can draw on that repository is great. But the quality of the output is going to be very challenging. But then university can assess funding once those research grants are meaningful to society development.
All right, we'll leave the conversation here and hope that going forward, the next 1 year will be better for Nigeria, not just in the education sector, which is the bedrock of any society, but all over. Now, if you just joined or you joined at a later part and you're wondering why we're taking a look at the education sector, it didn't begin from the education sector. Now, since yesterday, we're doing a special series commemorating the 1-year anniversary of President Bola Tinubu as Nigeria's 16th president, and we've been having a review of several sectors of the Nigerian economy under his administration. Yesterday, we looked at the agricultural sector. We also took a look at security. And today, we've explored the oil and gas sector, and we ended with education. You do understand that it is important that education is given attention, and looking at the agenda of President Bola Tinubu's administration, it's a beautiful one. We do hope that going forward over the next 3 years, many of the policies and agendas will be the agenda plan will be implemented, and Nigerians can begin to enjoy the gains. We wish the administration of President Bola Tinubu success, because it is important. When the administration succeeds, then of course Nigeria succeeds. It'll be a better place for everyone. And then what we say here in the early exchange, good Nigeria, that would have become a reality. Thank you so much, Sam Orovwuje, who's Director, Center for Public Policy, for helping us shape policy here today, because that's what early exchange is all about.
Thank you, Blessing. My pleasure.
The show continues tomorrow, 8 a.m. West African time. I am Blessing H. Stay with Sick News the rest of your day. You will enjoy it.
And don't forget, the conversation continues on our social media platform. You can also do a catch-up on our YouTube page in case you missed the earlier conversation that we had on oil and gas, and even the one we just had now. You can go on our YouTube page to do a catch-up. The special series continues tomorrow. I am Femi Ayodele. Thanks for watching.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.